Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to Talk with Tubbs, a petrolhead's perspective. As always, I'm your host, Tapelo, aka Tubbs, and I'm going to talk you through this podcast that deals with everything motoring. We're going to talk what's new on the market, what's old on the market, what's good on the market, and also what's bad on the market. Then we're also going to delve into some motorsport, but more focused on my favorite form of motorsport, Formula One. We're going to talk driver lineups, what we feel, react, but most of all, I'm trying to give you a petrol head's perspective. Words that come from someone who's as passionate about the industry as anyone I know. So as ever, let me not waste your time. Here we go. Talk with Tubbs is a go.
So, yeah, we're really at the end of the Formula One season, and what should have been a joyous time of reflection, no matter who you support, because ultimately we've had a fantastic season, but this should have been a time for reflection. This should have been a time for opinions on what is a sport that we love and what proved to be one of the best Formula One seasons. Well, certainly I have ever had the pleasure of watching. But unfortunately, that's been marred in controversy. That's been marred by inconsistent decision making. All that joy, all that celebration, all that admiration has been tainted. And I found myself yesterday feeling disillusioned with the sport because I couldn't make sense of what was happening. I couldn't find it within my mental capacity. I couldn't find it within my mental fortitude to make a decision or to make a ruling by myself that I felt justified what had happened yesterday. So yeah, look, as per the schedule, I was supposed to come on today and react to the final race of the season and sort of give an overview and give a review of the season that we've had. But it's so difficult to give that when the happenings of Abu Dhabi are still hanging over us. You know, we think it's been sorted now, but it really hasn't been, and this has the potential to have lasting ramifications for Formula One, for the drivers, and again, exactly that. It's so tough to have a summary of a situation, to have a summary of a season that I feel isn't complete at the current moment. But yeah, I still need to talk about it, and I think this is the best platform for me to voice my opinions. I was on radio to kind of talk about this already, and if you listen to that, then a lot of this will kind of be a repeat of all that. I think the most difficult part for me at this current moment is I'm doing this alone, so there really isn't anyone to bounce ideas from. So I really spend a vast portion of my night and morning just going through social media, engaging with people, listening to spaces, just trying to see or trying to get an idea of how to make sense of the situation. So yeah, if you missed the race, big mistake. But let's talk about this. Let's talk about this and let's try and make sense of it, or at least let me give you my opinion on something that I feel ruined what has been a fantastic season in 2021. So with what was it, 7 laps to go, 6 laps to go, Nicholas Latifi hits the wall and triggers a virtual safety car, period. Right? No, I think they went straight to safety car. And my reaction at the time was stress. Stress because Max was on fresher tires. There was an offset between him and Lewis Hamilton. But and Lewis is on all tires, really all tires. I can't remember the number of laps he'd done. So already there I was like, look, if there's a restart, I think Lewis Hamilton will be under immense pressure, and I don't think there's much he can do to defend. But it's a bit nuanced because at the time I remember saying to my dad and my sister who were watching the race with me that, look, if these guys take a long time to clear this car and to clear the debris on track, then it's fine. The race will end under safety car conditions, and essentially we'll have the result as what it was when the safety car was triggered, because this is something we've seen before. We've seen races end under red flag. We've seen races end under safety car. Or worst case condition was we get a red flag and we have a standing restart. In this case, that would equalize. If Max puts on a fresh set of tires, Lewis could do the same. So that removes the offset or the discrepancy in tire performance. Then essentially would have a 5-6 lap shootout at the end. But anyway, I was going based on the decisions that we'd seen in Formula One before. And again, as always, I am biased. I am a Lewis Hamilton fan. So for the large portion of that race, I wanted him to win. And I think this is where we before we get into the decisions that were made by the stewards, this is where we need to talk about individual driver performance. Lewis Hamilton, I'm massively proud of the guy, and I'm proud of the resolve that he's put in. I'm in awe of the tenacity that he has, the focus that he has, the strength that he has. There were points within the season where we felt as though the season is gone. Coming out of Austria, he was 32 points behind Max Verstappen. Started eating at that lead. Silverstone, we know the decisions in Silverstone. We're not going to reopen that book, but that's where he started to claw back. And throughout the season, it was chopping and changing between the teams, and you were kind of watching in awe of, wow, these teams, these two drivers are going at it, and the momentum was switching between the two. And then you get to Mexico, actually you get to Kota, and Max Verstappen wins at a track which was rumored to be a Mercedes track, and Max Verstappen wins 2 in a row. And that's where you start to feel like, okay, yeah, Verstappen might have the momentum at the right time. This is where he kind of sums it up. This is where he grabs hold and pushes for his first title. Then you get to Brazil, and Lewis Hamilton has got good performance in the car. But then the disqualification comes, and that's where you feel like, oh no, this is the turning point. This is where the season goes to Max. And Lewis Hamilton has a brilliant performance in Brazil. As much as I've watched him, I think that has to rank within probably his top 3 performances, because I am thinking about, is it Silverstone 2008? That was a very good performance. Turkey 2020 was an astounding performance as well. But yeah, I think Brazil 2021 is going to edge it on just pure class and the things he had to accomplish to get that win. And then the momentum shifts again. Trust me, I'm getting to a point by giving this account. And Hamilton wins 3 races in a row. He wins in Brazil, he wins in Qatar, and he wins in Saudi Arabia. Crazy, right? And then everything is set up as we go into the final season, and these two drivers are level on points. Now, this is a crucial factor, the fact that they're level on points, because depending on who you support and depending on where your allegiances lie, a lot of people basically as a result of Abu Dhabi are pushing the narrative that Max deserved the championship. Ultimately Max won. I'll give it that. And I've never posted any congratulations to Max, simply because it's a difficult situation, and I'm going to get to that. But yeah, we go level into the final race. These guys are level on points, 369.5 points each. At that point, as we all wanted this shootout, as we wanted this fantastic culmination of what has been a great season, at that point, we really cannot say one deserves it more than another. They're equal on points. So the argument that whoever won deserved it more, it just taints what happened. It ignores the circumstances of Abu Dhabi, because had the circumstances not happened, we could have actually had a season where both drivers finished on 9 wins each. Then who deserves it more? So this has put a blight to an interesting season. So let's get on what the stewards did. The stewards changed the rules a lot. So going into that safety car period, there were five cars between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. Those Hamilton had already lapped them. So I'm watching this play out and I'm like, okay, there's a possibility that this race will end under safety car conditions. I don't think they will allow these cars to unlap themselves simply because the time is limited. And I thought if they are to restart the race, then that's advantage Hamilton. He can pull away while Verstappen will have to lap these cars. Yes, granted, they won't interfere that much. They'll be showing blue flags. They'll move to the side. But nevertheless, there is a time loss whenever you have to lap someone. And the stewards come on. Well, an alert comes on that the stewards have decided that the lapped cars will not be allowed to unlap themselves. And that's why I thought, okay, I can finally relax. This is good. And then there's communication between Red Bull and Michael Massey. And then he tells them he needs again, I'm not trying to play into the conspiracy, but I'm stating facts on what we saw. And he tells them he needs to consider this decision, not to make the wrong decision. To which Christian Horner retorts, you only need one racing lap. And then that's where things went south. All of a sudden, certain cars are allowed to unlap themselves, which is not something we've seen before. Whenever cars are allowed to unlap themselves, it's all the cars that have been lapped. And this is where the discrepancy comes in, because the rules say any lapped car. Now, the argument is any does not include all, but if the totalitarian interpretation of the rule says any lapped car, that would entail literally any lapped car. All lapped cars can unlap themselves, because the main point or the main idea behind having cars that are lapped unlap themselves to not interfere at the start of the race is exactly that. They are slower than the guys in the front, seemingly because they've been lapped. So they would cause interference. And this is where it didn't make sense for me. Upon looking at which cars were allowed to unlap themselves, it seemed that these cars were only the cars in between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. So you want a title challenge. You don't want anyone interfering with the two title protagonists. But here's the other question. Everyone in the race is competing for points. Points are awarded to the top 10 race finishers, not only number 1 and 2. So if you're cherry picking which cars can unlap themselves and not all of them, then by that train of thought, you're disregarding the very rule why cars that are lapped can unlap themselves. Because now essentially you've still got cars, in this case Ricardo, Mick Schumacher, and I can't remember the third driver, but there were 3 cars, because 8 cars were lapped and 5 were allowed to unlap themselves. So now what's essentially happening is you have 3 cars that can cause interference, that can ruin the chance of someone else getting points. And you have to consider that points were tight elsewhere in the grid. Lando Norris, Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc were all competing for position in the constructors standing, So again, like I'm saying, once you choose that certain cars can unlap themselves and others can't, you're changing the rules, but you're also neglecting the fundamental principle of why lapped cars can unlap themselves. So that was a problem. But then there's another rule that was contravened, and we saw that after the race when everyone started putting out screenshots of the regulations, etc., is when cars are allowed to unlap themselves, the safety car is coming in the lap after, which would give them enough time to kind of clear the dangerous area where these lapped cars will be. But the safety car came in on the lap that these cars were allowed to unlap themselves. Now, again, it just doesn't make sense. You wanted to push for 1 lap of racing, but the conditions were not necessarily following the letter of the law. Then it later came out that there's a law that the race director has the discretion to overrule certain laws and regulations. But now the problem is, why is he only doing it now? Why is he only doing it in the final race And why is he cherry picking to create a scenario? I've said this before on this podcast, and I've said this to other people that I've had conversations with in private spaces, that the main aim of the FIA is to ensure that rules are applied as cleanly and as equally as possible. So if we're in a situation where the very people that are in charge of these rules, the very people that are in charge of implementation, are cherry picking rules and are changing rules to create a scenario, to create a narrative, then you lose faith in the organizing body. Like, still today, I thought I was over this when I went to sleep last night, but I'm still sitting here, and the more I talk about it, the more I engage about it, the more difficult it gets to get over it, because what exactly are we doing? And I said, Michael Massey created a situation that's not only good for him, but it's not good for the FIA, it's not good for the sport. Look, ultimately, Max Verstappen won because of that, and we can't blame Red Bull for playing to the laws. It's like the football principle, you play to the whistle. If the ref does not see an issue, you keep playing. But in this case, the ref didn't apply the rules. The ref, there's a difference between something passing you by and you willfully making up a principle or a rule, or disregarding principles and rules that are already there. And that's the problem with what happened in this race. It's so difficult to accept, because when people are saying Max Verstappen was going to catch up, he couldn't. There was a point where Mercedes said to Lewis Hamilton, listen, for Max to catch you up, he needs to lap 0.8 of a second faster than you. He couldn't. Lewis Hamilton still had enough pace to kind of block that out. Yes, Verstappen was lapping faster, but not to a rate where he was going to catch Lewis Hamilton at the end of the race. So remove the red flag incident. I know red flags happen all the time, and I'm not going to blame Latifi for that. Those things happen. But remove that incident, and Lewis Hamilton wins the race. Now add on the safety car incident. Sorry, not red flag, safety car incident. Add on the safety car incident, and if we're following the rules, Lewis Hamilton still wins. And this is what's pushing the narrative, which I also firmly believe and I stand behind, that Lewis Hamilton was robbed of his 8th title, and thus would have made him statistically the greatest Formula One driver in history. I don't get the narrative that this shouldn't have happened, or the problem is the FIA were inconsistent. And this is something we've spoken about at length throughout the whole season, that if these guys fail to apply laws consistently, if these guys want to leave too many things to interpretation, if these guys cannot be firm in the laws and penalties that they give out, then unfortunately there will be a flashpoint. There will be a point where all that is going to come to the fore. And this was it. The FIA simply failed to uphold the law of the sport. And that's why we're sitting in this situation. And I don't like to say this, but I have to. As a race director, or as a steward, or as a member of the FIA, one of the founding principles that you have to work by is to not put the sport into disrepute. It's to do your duties and due diligence. And if Michael Massey can't, then he should go. Then he should lose his job, because he is bringing around a cloud that clouds the entire sport. And that's the difficult part. The ramifications of what he did don't only apply to Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. Yes, they did in this case, but it's wider than that. The wider context dictates the issues that will arise from this. The lack of faith in the organizing body of the sport. The disillusionment that people will have with the sport. What happens if Mercedes decide that the injustice is too much and continue to push this? As we've already seen, they've already made mention that they might be taking this to the Court of Arbitration for Sports. What then? What about the sport? What about this title? Are we in a situation where the title could change hands? Ultimately, there is no winner, because yes, Max Verstappen won, and that's what people see. But for the people that have watched the season, for the people that watch the sport, for the people that know of the shenanigans that went down, that win has an asterisk next to it. It's blighted by this decision. And if Mercedes' case lost in court, And it's decided that to effectively rule out the shenanigans means that the race result will be decided on the positions that were there when the safety car was triggered. Then Lewis Hamilton wins. That means the title needs to be taken away from Max and given to Lewis. Sorry about that. And given to Lewis. Now, that also blights the win for Lewis, because now people will say he didn't win it on track. He won it in a courtroom. But at the end of the day, I guess that's the consequence of righting an injustice. Like, the FIA and Michael Massey, as the liaison between us and them, opened a can of worms that I don't think can ever be closed up. It's such an unfortunate incident, but it's blatant cheating and it's blatant manipulation of a situation to create a fight. I as a Lewis Hamilton, I was perfectly set to accept and clap hands and give praise if Max Verstappen won it cleanly. Honestly, that was my thing. I didn't have a problem with who won, but I wanted it to be in a fair manner. I wanted it to be a win that had no meddling. I wanted it to be a win that didn't create this particular situation we are in now. You cannot justify by saying Max deserved it. Mate, to win a title is to score points. Deserving it is nothing if you don't materialize your wins. And that's the part. We cannot use the argument of he deserved it. They were equal on points. By that fact alone, both drivers deserved it. And this is the difficult part, because there are a lot of people we expected to commentate on the sport. They took a backseat to the entire thing. They were so afraid, and I've said this throughout the season, there are certain personalities that were so afraid to give an opinion on this. So afraid. I commend people that gave an opinion. I commend Lando Norris, who said this doesn't make sense. I commend Danny Rick, who kind of pointed it out. I commend and respect George Russell for putting his word out there and calling this situation for what it was. And I saw people going at George saying it's because he's going to Mercedes next year that he's voicing his disapproval of the situation. People need to remember, George is president of the Grand Prix Drivers Association. He has an opinion. He has a stance he has to take. That was him simply doing or taking responsibility for what his position entails. So many things went down in this race, and it's this decision that ruined it. Lewis Hamilton had driven brilliantly. There is no fault that can be placed on Lewis Hamilton. And I read on Twitter that apparently he's inconsolable, he's in tears. And I understood that because I've played sport more than once. I've stepped off the sport field and I was in tears. I was on my knees. I was inconsolable. It's happened to me before. So I know that kind of reaction. I know what it feels to do everything right. I know what it feels like to do everything that you can do and still have situations not go your way. So I understand that. I understand. There was no fault you could give to him. And let's talk about the Mercedes strategy, because everyone has been going on and on about it. That's the perfect strategy that Mercedes could have played. The world is not perfect. Whatever simulation you have, things will work around that. So that's as perfect they can be in an unperfect situation. I keep on saying, track position was important because passing a Red Bull is not easy. And we saw that with the brilliant defense that Checo Perez had for Lewis Hamilton. That's the kind of racing we want to see. But if you're leading the championship, if you're in a position to win, that's not a risk you take. Hamilton was comfortable leading with those hards. He was comfortable setting a lap time that made it impossible for Max to catch him. He was comfortable. So to pit would mean putting him behind one or even two of the Red Bulls. That's the risk of trying to overtake both those cars is higher than the risk of staying out and holding track position. There really isn't much you could do with that strategy, because at the end of the day, the risk of compromising the win was much higher. I think that strategy played out well. I think that's the best they could do. Because any other way, then they are increasing the risk of Hamilton having to scrap again with Checo, Hamilton having to scrap with Verstappen. And we've seen Hamilton and Verstappen go wheel to wheel. 6 times during this season, it hasn't gone right. There's been contentious calls. There have been touches. There's been contact. That's not the risk you want to take. So from a strategy perspective, I think Mercedes played it well. I think they did what they had to do. And Lewis Hamilton did what he had to do. But everything about this weekend comes down to what Michael Massey and the stewards did on the day. And for people saying Mercedes should give this up, how can you forgive an injustice? How can you forgive being blatantly wronged? This happened in front of the whole world. We watched this happen in real time. How do you give that up? I understand why Mercedes didn't take any interviews. And I have to heap so much praise for Lewis Hamilton for doing the interview at the end. That spoke volumes of his character, of the values that he holds true. We saw that with his dad as well, going over to congratulate Max and congratulate his father. No doubt in my mind that they hurt. No doubt in my mind that they're feeling way worse than we are feeling as fans. But how do you expect Mercedes to give this up? Any other team in this situation would have done the exact same thing. I have no doubts about that. Switch the tables around and Red Bull would have been doing the exact same thing that Mercedes are doing. Hell, for 4 races, Red Bull have been pleading and putting doubt over Mercedes' technical infringements over the rear wing and its flexibility. And guess what? They couldn't even prove that, but they made it a thing. So do you think that team would given up being wronged in a situation that they can see, that they can prove? The FIA will not rule against themselves. They will not say we made a mistake, because ultimately that looks badly on them. So we need an independent body to give judgment on this. I'm all for Mercedes pushing this up to CAS. I'm all for Mercedes pushing this as far as it can go. But whatever the result, no one comes from this unscathed. No one comes from this with their head held up high. I'm hurt as a fan, not only a fan of Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes, but as a fan of the sport, because like I said, the wider ramifications of this decision taint the entire sport. It's so difficult, and I'm not disillusioned to that. I'm not oblivious to the fact that Michael Massey has a difficult job as a race director, that the stewards have a difficult job. If Formula One is such a nuanced sport, it's not easy to rule on it, to look at the regulations, to interpret them, but stick to the letter of the law. Formula One didn't need a maverick. Formula One needed an impartial, objective race director, an impartial and objective stewarding team. If someone has to take the fall, then Michael Massey has to lose his job, because he is bringing the very organization that he's supposed to uphold into disrepute. There is no comeback from this situation where everyone walks in unscathed. There will always be ramifications for what happened this weekend. I guess that's all I have to say, because the more I speak about this, the more difficult it is to ignore it, the more difficult it is to move on. But we have to. And we have to wait and see what Mercedes' second appeal is, because the FIA have already kicked their first appeal. We have to wait to see what the decision is later in the week, and we have to wait and see if Mercedes push this up to CAS, and we have to wait and see what CAS will say. See what I mean about this season being blighted by an incident? It's difficult to call, but at the end of the day, I think an appeal, I think discourse is the perfect thing. We will be talking about this for years to come, but as we should. As always, this has been Talk with Tubbs. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to the fans that have supported this podcast. Thank you to the guys that listen. Thank you to the guys that have an opinion with me. Thanks to the guys that have engaged with me. But yeah, today, this weekend has been a tough one to swallow. This weekend has been very difficult. Guys, see you soon.